All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Brett Starr. I'm the CEO and founder of the Starr Conspiracy. Super excited to be joined today by Don MacPherson and also Steve Smith, my business partner for a million years. And really looking forward to the podcast today. We're going to give people a few minutes to filter in, see that folks are coming in now. And so traditionally we start with some introductions, but let's start with our moment of gratitude today. I'll get started. That's really easy for me. I am so grateful for the holidays, and I'm so grateful to be turning the page on 2022 and moving into 2023. I don't want to be negative at all, but 2022, I think, was a very difficult year for a lot of folks. And it certainly was for me and a lot of people around me who I love. And I just love, having some time in the holidays to kind of reset on priorities, spend time with family. It's full to be a few days away from a holiday break. And I prepared an eggnog in my Tom and Jerry glass today, my vintage 1950s Tom and Jerry glass. And here's to you guys. What about you, Don?
I'm grateful for people. And I sit here in my home office in Minneapolis, and it's -3 degrees Fahrenheit. So I know you probably have some international listeners. -3 is really cold in Celsius. And I had a very similar realization last winter is, for as divided as we are, we need each other. And I'm grateful that there are HVAC people fixing furnaces. I'm grateful that there are people plowing the snow. I'm grateful that there are people who are protecting us in many different ways. And I just wish that and hope that more people will realize how important we are to each other, regardless of what our beliefs are. So for those reasons, I am grateful for each and everybody listening and each and everybody I will interact with today and you will interact with today.
Here. How about you, Steve?
I'm grateful for holiday cookies. I've been inundated with cookies of all varieties. And so, I'm grateful for that wonderful mix of sugar and butter and sometimes some chocolate, peanut butter, powdered sugar, sprinkles, all of it. And to all those people who took the time and care to craft holiday cookies and send them to my house, I thank you. Wish you a happy holiday. And I'll also be sending you an invoice for a larger size of pants, which I will probably need here within the next few days.
Yeah, that's what it's for. All right. Well, let's get started. Don, this series that we're running, we're having a lot of conversations with folks about winning the downturn and what a downturn looks like. But there's this other theme that we have going in the background, which is we're really bringing, many of the legends of work tech into conversations. And when Steve and I sat down and said, who are the legends of work tech? People who were here at the beginning, in the middle, and where we are now. You're certainly at the top of that list. We're very honored to have you today. As people find out during this conversation, you got started in employee surveys like a long, I don't want to say it that, like a long, long time ago. It wasn't that long ago. But you've certainly seen the evolution of the work tech market. You've seen the evolution of people practices. You're a 5-time entrepreneur. You've seen probably multiple downturns in different ways from different perspectives. And you've been through some of the early and most, in my opinion, influential kind of mergers and acquisitions that were fundamental to creating the employee experience space, the employee engagement space, et cetera. I really hate doing introductions of other people because, it just never feels as accurate as what you can say about yourself. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? I'm sure everyone knows, but come on.
Very unlikely. So I've been on the on the sidelines of the work tech space for about 5 years now. It's pretty remarkable. But I did get my start back in 1994 working at American Express in the employee survey space. And then we started our company in 1999 and sold it in 2016. So I had a great run there. Worked for the company that bought my company, Aon, for 2 years. And since then, I started a company called 12 Geniuses, which is really exploring trends that are shaping the way we live and work. And it's a wide variety of trends, as you can imagine, including social trends and technology trends. And one of the things that I think will probably be uncovered during our conversation today is there's probably, in my opinion, never been a better time to be in this space, in the work tech space. People are essential to moving us forward as humanity. And it's so difficult to get great people working, getting them on the same page, and working in unison to meet our goals. Work has gotten more complicated and leadership has gotten more complicated. And so I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation. That's just a little bit of my background. Personally, I've got 2 little daughters, and that's one of the reasons why I've had this hiatus and started 12 Geniuses and started exploring these trends. Is the world had passed me by. I'm 54 years old with a 4 and a 6-year-old. So I really wanted to understand, where are we going, and how is the world going to change? So that's a little bit about what I've been up to.
Yeah, my son's 8 and my daughter's 11. And when the son, says, my 8-year-old, who's really into PC games, and I'm an Apple guy, when he says, "Hey, can you download this game for me?" That usually initiates about an 8-hour, 5-step technology process. I'm also an older guy who has younger children. It's a lot to stay on top of the trends that are that are native to the kids. So I totally get that. I want to ask about 12 Geniuses, but Steve, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi there. I'm Steve. I'm one of the partners here at Starr Conspiracy and Chief Marketing Officer, and really excited to be talking to Don. Don and I have had a lot of interactions this year. He's got a fantastic podcast. He's got some very amazing guests, and I'm really looking forward to tapping into some of Don's insights as we're all looking at the year ahead. So thanks for being with us, Don.
Absolutely. Thank you, Don. And 12 Geniuses is amazing. Tell us about 12 Geniuses, because this is truly, I've got a couple of pitches that I want to make today. One is that if you're not listening to 12 Geniuses, you need to. Yeah. As Don tells us a little bit about, the themes and the guests and everything, I think you'll see that it's something that you really want to tune into. And, Don, you said you're kind of, on the margins of work tech now. I kind of view that differently, because leadership and the folks that you're talking to, inevitably, everything that they talk about is also located in, kind of business and, being a people leader and, things like that. So I think the content is super relevant. It's really well done and tremendous guest. Tell us a little bit about 12 Geniuses. What's the name kind of says it all, but there's more to it. So tell us about it.
I started the company because I really wanted to reinvent myself. So I had been working in this software space and HR technology space. And as I mentioned, I was really hyper-focused on our space, our domain. And when we sold the company, I realized, my goodness, the world had really changed and changed before my eyes. I wasn't really paying attention to it. And so I wanted to explore what these changes are, from social trends like aging and addiction, immigration, inequality, to technology trends like quantum and AI and cybersecurity, all of these, a wide variety of changes. And what it comes down to is, in order for us to navigate these changes, we need great leaders. And so that's where the connection occurs, is we're exploring these trends through the podcast. And then I'm helping leaders make sense of what these trends are, what it means for humanity, what it means for an industry, what it means for a company. And so that's really what the design of 12 Geniuses was I'm going to interview really, really smart people from around the world about these trends. And then I'm going to help companies, my clients, or through speaking engagements, help people understand what leaders can do to navigate their organizations and their people through these incredible changes that we're seeing. And obviously, the changes aren't slowing down. Just a week or two ago, the news is filled with fusion energy, the prospect of that, and then Artemis, Orion is coming down and we're returning to the moon and we're going to colonize Mars. And then Chat GPT is in the news. And like these three things would be groundbreaking news stories in any other decade, but now it's just kind of the way it is. And that's the way it will be going forward. And so that's really what I'm trying to do with 12 Geniuses, is understand what these trends are and then help people make sense of these trends and make sure that their people are relevant, have the training they need in order to flourish into the future. And so that's where the connection to work tech and HR is.
Cool. So correct me if I'm wrong. You do 12 episodes a season, right? That's why it's called 12 Geniuses.
That's correct.
And you're in what season now?
Just finished recording season 8 with Chester Elton. You probably know the name. So he was the last guest of season 8. And then we just started recording season 9, which is going to be on the topic of resilience. And I interviewed Fred Luskin, who is a forgiveness expert. So we're going to talk about forgiveness and the importance of forgiveness in building resilience. So think about personal resilience and also organizational resilience as it relates to failure within the organization. And then yesterday I interviewed a woman who was one of the first Apache helicopter pilots, first female Apache helicopter pilots back in the 1990s. Wow. And we talked about grit and resilience. And then I've got a number of other episodes coming up, including one on aging, which is really, really bizarre. This guy believes that you and I, if we make it to 70, we'll likely make it to 120 or beyond.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, I saw a commercial the other day, because that's where I learn almost everything is through commercials. And they were talking, they had a child in frame, and they said, this could be the first person to live to 150 years. And that's definitely, predicted in this next generation that, lifespan is going to take such huge leaps. Steve, you don't have anything to say about Chat GPT, do you?
Oh, a few things. I think that, AI suddenly got real for a lot of folks. And I think that, just in my experience with it, the thing that surprised me about Chat GPT is just that it's actually pretty good. And AI went from being, hey, this has promise, to it has real application here and today. What's your take on it, Don?
Yeah, very similar to that. And interestingly, a week or so ago, I met with my podcast producer in London. So he's based out of London. And we were talking about artificial intelligence. And he's like, this is going to put me out of a job. And I said, well, Rich, don't think about it that way. Actually, think about it in a way that it's going to enhance what you're able to do. Yeah. He said, I said, this technology is going to just accelerate and enhance your capabilities. So imagine, coming up with designs, after having a morning meeting with a company, and then, presenting half a dozen different designs that afternoon to them. Mm-hmm. And think about how quick you're going to be able to respond to them. So I think of AI generally as a tool, not as a replacement for work, but just a way to supercharge what we already do.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that, I think it's something that my friend David Bruner told me. He runs an AI startup called Module Q that does a lot of really amazing things in terms of bringing like critical information to you kind of like just in time. And so he's a brilliant guy. He has a PhD from Harvard Business School. He's a computer science guy out of Stanford. And one of the things when we talk about AI that he pointed out is like, every time there's been a leap in automation, it actually creates more opportunities and jobs. So if you go back to like the Industrial Revolution, it's just like you got to like the advent of the loom. It's just like you go from people doing piecework to all of a sudden being able to employ, dozens, hundreds of people, thousands of people more than you would be otherwise. And so I think right now there's kind of a collective freak out going on of, is this going to, cost me my job, or is my job going to be diminished, or my opportunities going to be diminished? And I think that you're looking at it from the right way of just that there's a lot of opportunity that AI and other cutting edge technologies right now are going to present.
Can I tell you what I'm going to do with Chat GPT? Because it's super important. And then we'll get into the heart of what we're talking about. But I've always wanted to write fan fiction about pharmaceutical commercials. Where you see the pharmaceutical commercials, and it's like the woman who shows up like at the lobster shack because she's finally, beaten psoriasis or something like that. And there's all these like wonderful stories, these vignettes that are used to, kind of like promote the drug. And I thought, wouldn't it be fun to like actually write the backstories of like everything that leads to that moment in the commercial? So I'm going to automate 90% of that through AI, and then just finish it up in a couple hours, because it's not really worth spending that much time on anyway. So who have been some of your favorite guests through the years?
That's a question that I get quite a bit, and it's a really difficult one to answer. So I'll give you a couple of different answers. One would be Lou Nanne. He was the general manager for the Minnesota North Stars. A defunct team became the Dallas Stars in the NHL, National Hockey League. And I remember going to games. He's 81 or 82 years old now. I remember going to games and seeing him play. But incidentally, he's my dad's favorite hockey player. And so I got to interview him. I didn't tell my dad I was interviewing him, and then we released the episode. So that was really fun.
Cool.
And then another one is Master Gunnery Sergeant Scott Stalker, who is Command Senior Enlisted Leader of U.S. Space Command. And I actually got to go on site and see their offices in Colorado Springs. He and I have interviewed, he's been interviewed twice on the show for The Future of War and Love and Leadership are the two names of the episodes. Those two stand out to me. And generally, the ones that stand out are ones where I've created a relationship with the guest. Some people just want to be on the show and that's it. Other people are willing to have a relationship. We'll have lunch or dinner when we're in the same city. And he's one of those people. I've gotten to meet his wife. We've gone out to dinner, and we've just created a nice friendly relationship. So those are two that stand out to me.
That's great. I'm curious if you how much did your sabbatical lead to the idea for 12 Geniuses? Because you took a sabbatical after your time with Aon, right? And wasn't that like a year long, just over a year? What how important was that, and what would be your recommendations for people about sabbaticals?
Well, the sabbatical coincided with having our second child. And I had the idea for 12 Geniuses prior to taking the sabbatical. And so I think I refined things during the sabbatical, but just having free time and spending it with my family. So I think that really centered me. And something really quite strange happened to me when my second daughter was born. So it was just after I left Aon. My daughter is born. Our family is complete. Now we're 4. And I had feelings of hate occasionally. There were people that I didn't really care for and things that I didn't really care for. And this emotion of hate totally left my body at that time. So I don't know if it was the sabbatical. I don't know if it's the completion of our family, but I really became centered during that period of time in my life. And there are a lot of changes, obviously, so I can't really pinpoint it to the sabbatical, but having that time to think and consider who I am and who I want to be, and having the resources in order to try to become that person, that was pretty important. And I would say that's, that time and spending that time thinking, it's a beautiful and wonderful thing. And if you have that opportunity, that privilege, please take advantage of it. because, we're only on this earth one time,
Yeah.
and we need to make the most of it. And that's hopefully what I'm doing with this pivot and this idea of reinventing myself.
Yeah, what an amazing idea, and what an amazing feeling to have that hate just leave. And it must have been, you must have been really reliant on something that you talked about earlier, which is forgiveness. I've been in business for a long time. Steve has been in business for a long time. All these slights, that we feel just kind of pile up. And, sometimes you look at where you are and you imagine where you could be were it not for this, or were it not for this other thing, or this decision, or that person. And that can really build up and start to have a really significant impact, not just on your, life and lifestyle, but also in the way that you show up, to be a leader and for work. So what an incredible feeling. And you've been able to hold on to that this whole time.
Yeah, in fact, just really embracing it and becoming far more empathetic than I ever was, and curious. And so I'll give you an example. There weren't a lot of things that I hated, but politicians or political ideas or things like that. And I won't disclose what my politics are, pretty much middle of the road, but things that might trigger other people. I would just want to know why. Why is this person saying that? Why are they doing that? What has happened to them that would kind of lead them to this place, and try to engage with them, not try to change their mind. I think that's part of the problem, is we're not curious enough and about what the other person, and then we want to try to change them. That's not what I'm interested in doing, but I'm really interested. I've just become far more curious over the last handful of years, and I just really want to understand why somebody might be where they are, and then show them love. I don't agree with you, but I'm not going to judge you and say you're a bad person. I see you as a human being, and I can care for you. And I love, Steve, the way that you end your emails. Everybody love everybody. That's such a wonderful aspiration. And I've kind of moved toward that. Not judging. And I tell you, happiness is a lot easier to attain when you do that. You just don't get triggered by things that upset a lot of other people.
Yeah. What a wonderful sentiment for the holidays, especially having lived through 3 years in a crucible of polarization and triggering, and just really, really nice thoughts. And this makes me happy to hear it. So let's go back in time a little bit. Let's talk about Modern Survey. 16-year journey with Modern Survey, right? What is the story of Modern Survey? And I think one of the things that people really want to hear from people like you about is, Steve and I had this realization, recently, that some of the people that are clients, some of the people who are in our company have never been through a downturn before. They've been through adversity. We've obviously all been through adversity. But an economic downturn, is something that is really kind of different than some of these other experiences that we've had over the last few years. So how did Modern Survey start? What opportunities did you find during the global financial crisis? How did that set you up for success with Aon? Et cetera, et cetera. That's a question in 18 parts.
Yeah, there's a bunch of parts to that. So help me navigate. I'll just start out with where we were in 1999. My business partners, Patrick and Dan Riley's, so they're brothers, and myself, we started the company. We each put $1,000 in. So we were capitalized with a whopping $3,000. And we had this idea, or actually Patrick and Dan did. I can't take credit for this, but they had the idea of doing employee surveys online. So this is 1999, and paper was the way that surveys were done, and long processing times, and we won't go into all of the challenges.
You had already been doing them at American Express, right?
We had been, and they became our first client. So we started transitioning paper surveys to online through Modern Survey, and this was a big risk by our clients, but but they trusted us. And that's what I will say is we succeeded because we had high levels of integrity and high levels of innovation. People trusted us, and therefore we could be innovative. But American Express was our biggest client. And in 2001, we had a downturn, and also 9/11 happened. And American Express is downtown, not far from where the World Trade Centers were. And so that was a big hit. We lost about 60% of our revenue that year. And we went through a number of other downturns, including 2008, 2009. I tell people that in January and February of 2009, we sold $0. we had zero revenue. That's how devastated we were. And then we're going through this downturn now. There was the pandemic too. So we've lived through a bunch of different downturns, and how this one compares is nothing compared to certainly 2009 and also 2020. It was far more insecure during those timeframes. But we started the company without really a vision and without templates for how a tech startup should operate. And now we have so many different examples of how HR tech companies should be capitalized and having a vision and how to communicate that vision. That didn't exist then. So we were kind of making it up as we went along. And then it was really 2009 when we really drew a line in the sand and said, if we can make it through this, we are going to be extraordinarily successful. So I remember we had 17 people on staff at the time. And in February, so after zero sales in January and February, we decided we're not laying anybody off. And we went to our employees and we said, this is our team and we're going to make it through this, but we're going to have to sacrifice. And so some people cut hours, some people cut pay, but we knew that if we ride this out, our competitors are cutting 20, 25% of their staff. What's going to happen to the service when this thing comes back? They're not going to be able to serve their clients. And so we really doubled down during that time. You still with me?
Yeah.
I think I'm going to have to plug in here. Sorry.
No worries. Well, and it's interesting, you bring that up, Don, because, looking back, to kind of the early 2000s, when I was doing employee communication consulting, you're right, every surveys were on paper. And like the first time, we ever got into doing something that was like an online survey was right, prior to, me jumping into the agency here. And it was like, we were working with this guy we partnered with. He's like, okay, there's this thing called Survey Monkey, and we can do surveys online. It was just like, unheard of. And then, fast forward a couple of years, I guess it was probably about 2010-ish when, we started working together, and it's just like diving into kind of what Modern Survey was doing. It's just like, hey, this is a hell of a lot better than what, Survey Monkey was doing. And it is a quantum leap beyond paper. And really Modern Survey really is one of those brands that was kind of one of the first ones that I really took notice of. That was a sea change from everything that came before, the success factors, kind of like, 1.0 view of kind of the HR tech market. When, you really kind of laid the groundwork there during the downturn. Where did you start to see the payoff start to happen?
Yeah. So there's this, you guys might remember this from when we were kids, ABC's Wide World of Sports, right? And one of the things that they would televise would be these Mexican divers. So these guys would dive from these incredible cliffs.
Yeah, in Acapulco.
Yeah.
In Acapulco, yes. And they would start the dive when the waves were out. So there's no water in this little inlet, right? But they're up there so high that by the time they reach the water has returned, the wave has returned. And so that's how I kind of equate marketing in a downturn, right? Is the water's out right now. People are afraid. People are holding on to their money, but the payoff is not for 6 months or it's 9 months. So now is the time to be marketing, and you can market, I have some ideas for how to do this. This is a great time to build relationships. People are looking to navigate this downturn, this change. What does it mean to our employees? And so if you can start to establish trust and build relationships with people when the wave comes back, you're going to be perfectly positioned. So I actually think that downturns are great. If you are confident, and Warren Buffett says, be afraid when everybody's greedy, be greedy when others are afraid. This is a time to be greedy because others are afraid. So what's going to happen is that the companies that are afraid, probably the established companies, they're going to lay staff off. They're going to restrict their marketing dollars. This is when you lean in. This is your opportunity, because when the wave comes back, you're going to be perfectly positioned. You're going to land your dive. I just think that this is a great timing to lean into your marketing.
Yeah, I think this is one of the benefits, just so many things that I want to unpack here, but this is one of the benefits of thinking about marketing more holistically in the frame of customer experience. We think of customer experience as having 5 subdomains: brand, marketing, sales, product, and customer success, and that all of those things are part of the customer experience. And customer experiences are happening whether you know they're happening or not, all the time. And so a lot of times in a downturn, people will pull back on brand or marketing, or they'll change their sales strategies to become much more aggressive in order to hit their numbers, because surrogation has set in, and the numbers have become surrogates for the strategy. The strategy's been forgotten. It's just, we've got to hit our numbers. So they start doing things that, when you're cutting back on brand and marketing, you're distancing yourself from your customers. You're not building engagement. You're not building those relationships that you're talking about. And if you panic and start going in panic mode in sales, then you can actually undo a lot of the engagement and relationship building that you've created. And then, on the product and customer success side, if you stop innovating during that time, if you stop investing, then you're going to miss the mark. And so that point that you're making is so important, because, when people pull back, that's the time that you dive in. And what a great metaphor for that. But I want to go back to 1999, because literally you started a company with $3,000 in the worst time to start a company ever. It was the worst time. But there were some very interesting things that happened. Number one is that there was an organizing principle at play, right? So cloud computing, ASP, software as a service, those were new things, right? And so this notion of, hey, let's do our surveys online, taps the whole organizing principle of what was happening with paper-based systems and on-premise systems and all that stuff going on at the time. And I'm sure that you were probably in some deals where people were like, oh, don't do your surveys online. The data is going to be exposed, or, and they were actually fighting against not your company. They were fighting against the organizing principle that you built your company on, right? So there was this big sea change. You were part of the future. And how many times did you hear people arguing against the conventions that underpinned what you were trying to do? That no, online stuff is not the way to do it. This stuff has to be paper-based. This stuff has to be. Did you ever get those kinds of pushbacks?
Every time for the first 3 years. Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
It must have been
Cloud
obvious.
computing wasn't a thing. Cloud computing wasn't a thing, and software as a service wasn't a thing either, right? Those came later, even though that's what we were doing. Mm-hmm. and so, data security was one important thing, and data integrity, and so we had to do all sorts of testing. We actually had to install our software internally sometimes. Wow. That's how afraid people were. But we ran into all of those headwinds.
Yeah. So think about it though, and this is the point that I'm trying to get to, because we're here again. The combination of a downturn with a new organizing principle that is fundamentally rewiring society, because the internet rewired every level of experience, right? And so when a downturn, and people have forgotten what 2001 was like, you know, and some people weren't there. And it was probably as paradigm shifting for a lot of folks as the pandemic has been this time around, just the whole, gestalt of everything that was how we're the zeitgeist. But this combination of an organizing principle that is fundamentally rewiring society combined with an economic downturn, which causes people to reevaluate all the systems they have, all the purchase decisions they made, that's the moment to kind of hit the scene with a new technology. And I feel like we're in another organizing principle right now that the pandemic has fundamentally, rewired society, changed the types of solutions that people want, changed the ways that we eat dinner, change, the ways that we watch content, all that stuff. And so it seems that we are at the, if we were like technical, quant traders or something, we'd like, recognize this cross that's happening where it's like, oh, there's a downturn and there's an organizing principle, launch a business, go, go, go,
Yeah, in fact, I talked with one of my former business partners recently, and I said, "There's never been a better time to start a company." And I even wrote that in my notes. There's never been a more important time to be focused on the employee experience, ever. And just a couple thoughts on customer success. You talked about relationship building and trust. And I think there are a couple of really important tools that listeners can use to enhance the customer experience. And I'm stealing this from one of my mentors. But the first is Woody Woofy. And Woody Woofy is an acronym for what do you want for yourself? If you have that conversation with one of your customers or one of your clients, what do you want for yourself? And yourself can be your organization, your team, and you personally. When you know exactly what that client or that customer wants for themselves, now you can have a much deeper conversation. And then the second tool is know what their values are. If you know their Woody Woofy and you know what their values are, that's going to deepen and strengthen the relationship. And then you can position your solution to meet their Woody Woofy within their values. And it's going to comfort them and make them feel very positive about the relationship and about moving forward with you. So and you talked about people being expedient and kind of dropping prices or hitting their sales number. No way. Double down on the relationship. Double down on building trust. Understand what's important to them. Understand what their values are. That's the way I think to enhance the customer experience in this time right now.
And so you talked about, you hinted at the relationship between employee experience and customer experience. You probably are one of the people in the world that has more information on that than anyone else. What is the relationship between employee experience and customer experience? I know that seems like a simple question for someone who's delved as deep as you, but we believe that there's a relationship between employee experience, customer experience, and shareholder experience, and all those things have to be in balance, and it operates in an ecosystem. But we don't believe in the chicken and egg proposition of, what creates a great employee experience versus what does a great employee experience create. And so we tend to lead with employee experience. A lot of people aren't there yet. They don't, see the need for a holistic view of the relationship between EX and CX and SX. But you kind of see this play out, right? So what is the relationship between EX and CX?
So I'll answer that question and go a little bit further because my thinking over the last couple of years has really grown. The employee experience is so critically important to not only the customer experience, but it's critically important to society. When people have a great experience at work, they are obviously going to work harder to deliver for their customers. But where my thinking has been enhanced is around what happens when they leave work. So take a great employee experience out of the equation, and let's think about a miserable employee experience. How do you go home? What kind of husband are you? What kind of father are you? What kind of community member are you? Awful. You don't spend 40 to 50 to 60 hours a week being miserable at work and go home as your best self. And so this is what I'm trying to really drill into CEOs and heads of HR is like the employee experience is everything. You can't have a great product. You can't have a great roster of clients if you're not creating a great place for people to work where they can be their whole selves, where they can go home and be on vacation and actually truly have a vacation, where they can go home energized instead of depleted. I think it's so important, not only for just our clients, but for all of society. And so, I made the choice about a year or two ago that I'll never work for a company that doesn't want to just improve the employee experience so they can improve the bottom line, but a company that understands that they are making a contribution to society. So that's how important it is. And it starts way back in recruiting, and I think it goes all the way through alumni and keeping people who have worked for your company engaged with the organization and keeping those relationships intact.
Steve, what do you see as the threats to, I mean, obviously this has been a tough period, right? What do you see as the primary threats to employee experience right now that bleed over into CX? And I say this because a lot of times, we have tons of clients. We've worked with over 2,000 companies in work tech. And we just see over the years a bunch of different snapshots. And I used to say, kind of jokingly at first and then very seriously, for many companies in work tech, ironically, their biggest challenge is their own employee experience, because it is exacerbated by the lens that's created when the value proposition of your company is creating a great employee experience and you're not delivering one to your own employees. And so, Steve, what have you seen, this year and over the past, couple of years that just kind of signify the biggest threats or the biggest opportunities around that relationship between EX and CX?
Well, I think that, we've been talking, for 2 decades about the future of work. And there's been an awareness that there's not enough skilled labor to address the talent needs of organizations, regardless of category. Whatever industry you're in, there are labor shortages that are pervasive. And I think that for a lot of the past 20 years, it had been pretty theoretical. That there were certainly pains that were felt, but the world of work in a lot of ways until 2019 was not terribly different than 1999 or 1989. It was still, people went into an office, you did office-y things, you went home. There was all of kind of the cultural infrastructure of office work. And, the pandemic blew all that apart. And, there has, been sort of, I think, a collective freak out of people who run businesses, who run organizations, who want to get back to the cultural structures of office work. And the reality of, just in the US alone, there's 3 million fewer people in the labor force at a time when everybody needs to hire skilled labor. So, I mean, there are these pervasive shortages in talent. I think that, there is certainly a lot of fear in the ecosystem right now, in any employment situation because of layoffs. But then there's also this, desire on the part of a lot of, I guess, traditional leaders in whatever category of like, we want to go back to the way things were. And so I think that there's this tension of going back to the way things were versus we have to live in the world of the way things are. And so, that kind of tension within kind of the employee experience is bleeding over into the customer experience in ways that are they're very tangible. You feel them, in lots of different ways.
Well, isn't the downturn another example? Isn't this another example of finding opportunities to win, right? So, Don, you told the story of, the great financial crisis where you didn't sell anything in January and February, and you stood up and said, we're not going to lay a single person off, right? How critical was that to catching the wave when it came back in, right? So you did something that most companies wouldn't have done at that time. People were tightening belts on the CX side. They were tightening belts from marketing, brand, sales perspective, getting aggressive with sales, et cetera. You didn't do that. You jumped in. But on the EX side as well, belt tightening often means layoffs. It means, a bunch of different things. You didn't do that either. And it seems like there's another opportunity here to kind of zig while other people are zagging. How critical was that moment for catching the wind in your sails sooner than your competitors?
Critical on two fronts. So number one, when the market did come back, we had a fully staffed, capable team, right? So we didn't have to wait 6 months to train people. They were ready to go. And I don't know, when it really rebounded. It was sometime later in 2009 or maybe even beginning of 2010. So there were lean months. I can remember going without a salary for several months, maybe 6 months. I can't even remember. But it was lean. But we believed in ourselves, right? And then the employees picked up on that too. So they knew that they were betting on a winner. So that was important, is we had a fully staffed team when the market did turn around. The second thing was nobody got laid off, so nobody lost a friend. And that built us incredible loyalty. We were transparent. We opened up the books. We said, we're not skimming off the top here. We're not taking salaries. We as owners are not taking salaries. So they knew that we had their best interest in mind, and that built us loyalty. And when the market did turn around and when people did come, competitors came and tried to hire our people, they stayed. So in those two ways, we benefited greatly.
Well, understanding that not everyone's in the same situation because of different business drivers. Maybe they're a private equity owned business. Maybe they're, they just have different levels of controls around what they can do. What you just described to me is inherently a CX, a holistic CX driven view. It's actually a holistic experience driven view of how to succeed in a downturn, because that very notion of, if you don't see how EX is related to CX and you hit a downturn and you slow down your conversations and brand and marketing and your relationship building, and you get aggressive in sales and you lay people off, and then the economy turns around and everybody's getting their fair share of deals because maybe they're a market share leader or they're in second or third, so they're going to get deals anyway. But now all these folks are coming in who are going to be onboarded by new teams who are not fully ramped up, and they're going to have a bad customer experience. And if you put enough bad customer experiences together, it starts to have a really negative impact on your growth trajectory. And that's when other companies can kind of come in and go, in that scenario, and this is going to happen again right now. I bet at that time when the economy turned, you took market share away from people who, did the playbook. I saw this headline yesterday that said, retail investors are still in the stock market, but the pros are getting out. And I'm like, well, when the pros get out, they make it. They make the reality. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. They're not pros because they're calling it. They're pros because they're making it happen by pulling all their money out of the market, and all the retail investors are the ones that get screwed. When enough people, kind of make the playbook-driven decisions institutionally, as suggested by their shareholders, as suggested by their VCs, as suggested by their private equity companies, it actually makes the thing that they're scared of happen. But that's what creates all the opportunities for the folks who find themselves in a unique position where they have the trust of, and again, this is another point, you want to have the trust of your customers, CX, you want to have the trust of your employees, EX, and you want to have the trust of your shareholders, SX, so that when you go to your shareholders and say, we think now is a great time to double our investment in marketing and to control the narrative because everyone else is pulling back. And even though we're going to lose money for a couple of months, we think we need to hold on to employees so that when the economy turns, we're in position to deliver a great customer experience. It's holistic in nature. You have to think about all those things. It can't be just one. So surely that was, a significant moment twice, right? In 2001 and then again in 2008, 2009.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in 2008, 2009. And you bring up a great point in that I said that nobody lost a friend at work. None of our clients lost their project manager or their salesperson, or the person with whom they had the relationships, and that benefited us as well. The other thing too is then we're able to deliver a deeper level of service to them, and so there are all sorts of benefits from making the decision that we did. And I do understand that not everybody is in the position to make the choices that we did, but it benefited us greatly.
Well, just being cognizant of time. One thing I know I wanted to talk to you about, Don, is just influencer marketing and the role that it's going to play right now. When we did our WorkTech Outlook survey, influencer marketing was like number 2 or number 3 in areas of investment for 2023. Since you're an individual who, I mean, you've been a founder, you've run a business, you've looked at marketing from that point of view. But now, I mean, you fall what I would put in the influencer camp, because you have this great podcast, you have a global community of something like 90,000 HR, leadership, talent, and people professionals. That's an amazing community. What does influencer marketing mean for you, and where do you think the opportunities are in 2023 for people WorkTech brands looking to invest in that area?
Well, I think what is going to happen with influencer marketing, and that's, while I'm kind of in that space, it's not my area of expertise, but just looking from the outside, I think we're going to move toward integrity. And the reason why I say that is what's happened recently with crypto.
Yeah.
We just believed that the influencers had done the vetting and had done all of their research on crypto, and we know that that's not true. They were just taking money, and there's something different about Shaquille O'Neal being in a commercial promoting lotion or a Buick or whatever he's in, is we know that he's being paid for that. But there's a gray line with influencer marketing, and so I think the market is going to really transition toward integrity. Who are the people who aren't just going to take a check, but who are actually going to do some due diligence, before they agree to promote something. So I think that's where I would hedge my bets going forward, because I think a lot of people have been hoodwinked recently, and not really even understanding that, oh my gosh, this person might be getting paid for this.
Yeah.
I mean, we have those people in WorkTech, right? The people with, 800,000 Twitter followers who will, basically tweet anything that you want them to for, $50 or whatever. So we've had, like an influencer issue in WorkTech for a long time. I totally agree with the flight to quality, flight to integrity, in terms of being able to, trust, the voices that are bringing ideas into the market. I do just want to, shamelessly say that you have this amazing, look, here's what's going on in the world. Leading up to this moment that we're in right now, there's been more money invested in WorkTech in the past 2.5 years than in the previous 25 years combined. And what does that mean? Just take 10% of 60 or $70 billion or whatever, and imagine that goes straight into media purchase. And if you look around, you don't see a whole lot of like new places to market, which is why you see companies like UKG and Oracle and folks like that jumping into consumer channels and doing celebrity endorsements and sporting partnerships and stuff like that. And so the media field has not grown very much, but the investment in the media field has grown by an order of magnitude, which means that the existing media resources are completely fatigued. They're oversold. It's hard to get inventory. And there's some credibility being lost in industry marketing channels just because of the volume of marketing that is, being sent through these channels that haven't, kind of rose into the occasion of delivering high integrity, content, new content, et cetera. And so you represent a very, kind of fertile area for companies to think about marketing. I know this isn't your thing. It is our thing. You've got a really great media opportunity that performs very well. And you just don't find, Steve said 90,000 people. You just don't, look around and try to find any influencer that has a significant, reputation in the level of integrity that Don has in 12 Geniuses, and try to find anybody like that, A, and then B, try to find anybody like that with such a large audience, and then C, try to find anybody like that with such a large audience who actually has now the marketing infrastructure in place for sponsorships and promoters to come in and speak to that community. So we highly recommend the podcast. We also highly recommend it as a marketing opportunity for work tech companies.
Well, thank you both for that endorsement. I really appreciate it. And it validates what I've been doing over the last 5 years. And, I do everything I can to represent that integrity and help not only the audience that's consuming the podcast and our newsletter, but also those who decide to place and sponsor the show.
Well, Don, it's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks for taking the time. And Steve, as always, great to have a conversation with you. And look forward to doing it again. Let's do it again, Don, in the new year.
Love to. Happy holidays, guys. Happy holidays
Thanks,
to everybody.
Don.
I'll take care.
Happy holidays to you.